All right. In case you weren't here last year or last week, we're going to be working through the kind of four-part spiral path of a spiritual journey, the spiral path of the Wayless Way of Meister Eckhart, 14th century luminary, Dominican priest, uh, preacher, teacher, unbelievable light. The light was sort of uh, suppressed for 600 years after he got excommunicated because he was so in tune with the universe. It was not quite in tune with the Catholic Church and any of the three popes that were working at the time. It was a time we had three popes, and it was pretty corrupt. And so they didn't like him. He was calling them to it, like all prophets sort of call power to, stand up to power with truth. And so he was all his writings, sermons, teachings repressed for uh, 600 years or so, just discovered really in the 20th century. Um, so anyway, we have this great wealth, and we're doing a deep dive into it as a group, and I got five or six texts by Eckhart that I'm going back and forth from to this week to look at um, the second point on the path, which is to befriend the darkness. Last week we talked about the important first stage of befriending creation and the light, and the fact that we're part of something vast. I mean, something universal, and we sort of, if you didn't catch it, we sort of made short work of original sin. And we talked about the original blessing of being on this planet, being in this body, being here now. Yeah, if you missed making short work of original sin, well, it's on YouTube. It's on YouTube. Now, so you go from that first station on the mandala. Really, it's kind of spiral mandala. So original blessing, befriending creation. Now we go to the station, and that's sort of in the mandala form. That's sort of in the south. The south is the time of verdant growth and, just fullness. Well, now we go into the west, and that's where the sun sets. And so this is befriending darkness today. Okay, and so we're going to sort of investigate this, and at the end, that final couple Saturdays from now, we'll when we actually talk about the fourth part of this spiral journey, this spiral mandala. I'll also make part of that longer retreat, putting out there some resources so you can go deeper, because we're just introducing it, just giving you my reflections on it. It's deep, and I'll be reading into the material for a long time, probably my whole life. He's that good. So anyway, today's befriending the darkness. Well, let's start out with a 200 proof Meister Eckhart here. Just a little short poem, and it's called "Darkness Will Do." As we go from befriending creation and the light into the dark, just a little bit of wisdom from him that's called "Darkness Will Do." The mystery of your life is that you are to do nothing less than this. The mystery of your life is that you're to do nothing less than this, to radiate God. The mystery of your life is that you are to do nothing less than this, to radiate God. Don't look for light outside. Don't look for light outside yourself. Look inside. Don't look for light outside yourself. Look inside. Darkness will do as the place to start. Brilliant. Just really, it's a sentence from one of his sermons, but it's a poem in itself. The mystery of your life is that you are to do nothing less than this, to radiate God. Don't look for light outside yourself. Look inside. Darkness will do. Darkness will do. Darkness will do as the place to start. And so that's a little 200 proof Eckhart to start us off. Darkness will do. It is a good place to start. If you have some kind of underlying sense of the first part, which is, what we got out of Genesis and what I got growing up, what probably 99% of us who had any kind of Christian upbringing is, we started with original sin. That's not what he's talking about here. So what is he talking about? What is this darkness he's talking about? It's not original sin. It's everything we're afraid of. All that we don't want to see or feel or deal with. Fear, anger, grief, death, the unknown. Anything you don't want to see, anything you don't want to really experience. That's what he's talking about. And so how do you befriend that? How do you befriend that? So that's what we're going to look into today. But one thing we have, we're coming up to the end of 3 years. In March next month, we'll be going into our 4th year together. Some of us have been here all 4 years, and we've talked about a key thing here about working with darkness. You either transform it or you transmit it. Get that. And if you can find refutation of that, well, okay, but I haven't. That's sort of a kind of a cardinal precept here. When you're dealing with darkness, pain, all the dark emotions that were all around us, you either transform it or you're going to transmit it somehow, some way. It might be, you might repress it in the forms we repress it. You might act it out in the forms but I'm basically a repressor. Repressed a lot of this darkness early in my life, but it always snuck out sideways. Judgment, that's not the original thing I'm dealing with, but that pain comes out as judgment, sort of snarky statements, blah, blah, blah. It'll leak out. It's like toxic. You can't hold that much. It will leak out, just like all those containers of nuclear waste down in the caverns. It's not safe to repress it and hold it. And then it's doubly disastrous sometimes to just to give it to somebody else to offload it. We'll talk about all that. But so in working, this is working with the material, working with Eckhart during the week. Every morning I'd get up, have a cup of coffee, and dive into it for an hour or so. It has so much electricity to it that poems were flying out today. They just fly out from the material to the page, and just want to work with one poem. Want to read it, then reflect on it, and it's it's pure, purely inspired by Eckhart. So here's the poem, and this poem will be in the Monday Morning Musing if you want a copy of it. Title is Turning Sorrow into Joy. And there's a little subtitle under it. Don't believe for a moment that you are healing yourself. Don't believe for a moment that you are healing yourself. That was said by Rumi in the 13th century. Rumi and Eckhart would have just been pals because they were working on the same level. And Rumi said before Eckhart, don't believe for a moment that you are healing yourself. All this self-help stuff, no, doesn't work. Doesn't work. So we're going to look for another way. And this has 3 parts, just like in case you came in really late or didn't see it, the opening art piece, the music we had today was Silence. The opening art piece was a painting by a guy named Mark Rothko, and it had those 3 divisions of where this poem follows that. Tommy Bloom knows this. If you ever go to Houston, if I ever went back to Houston, The one place I would certainly go to is the Rothko Chapel. It's a place on the University of St. Thomas. It's a round chapel dome, and it's got a skylight that lets the light in all the directions. And then there's 16 of these paintings by Mark Rothko. Most of them seem totally black, and they have cushions lying around so you can sit in front of one and just meditate. It's a place it would be worth a plane ticket to go back. It's one, Tommy's probably been there. Uh, and and he dealt with the darkness. He unfortunately committed suicide at one point. He wasn't. He got engulfed by it, which is some of the danger when you really go into it the way some people really do. And he was meant to go into it with his painting. Unfortunately, that's what happened to him. But the place is a sacred place, and that painting is sort of the structure of this poem, 3 parts. So, turning sorrow into joy. Part 1. You can't avoid the great mystery. We can't avoid the great mystery because God creates the darkness. God is in the darkness. God is the darkness. God transforms the darkness. You can't avoid the great mystery because God creates the darkness. God is in the darkness. God is the darkness. God transforms the darkness. We'll come back and reflect on that, but for now, I just want you to hear the 3 parts. Part 2. Befriending the darkness of grief, despair, fear, trauma, or sadness. Befriending the darkness of grief, despair, fear, trauma, or sadness helps us grow deep roots of wisdom and compassion. Befriending the darkness of grief, despair, fear, trauma, or sadness helps us grow deep roots of wisdom and compassion. Part 3. I'm so damn sad all the time, she sighed. But when she finally realized that sad was happy for deep people, she lightened up considerably and strung Christmas lights all the way to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. And when she flipped the switch, she still cried. But now there were tears of joy. I'm so damn sad all the time, she sighed. But when she finally realized that sad was happy for deep people, she lightened up considerably and strung Christmas lights all the way to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. And when she flipped the switch, she still cried. But now they were tears of joy. Yeah. All right. Well, let's reflect on this a little bit. Turning sorrow into joy. Don't believe for a moment that you are healing yourself, Rumi. One of the great tragedies and one of the worst parts of darkness is if you think you're suffering alone. And that's what Rumi's talking about. Don't believe for a moment that you are healing yourself. There is a force. I don't care what you call it. Obi-Wan Kenobi called it the force. You could call it the Tao. You could call it the Buddha nature. You could call it Christ. You could call it God. I like to call it love. That's what works for me. But there is some transrational, transpersonal. Doesn't mean impersonal. Just means transpersonal, beyond the personal. There's some force that's in it. And so that's what the first part of the poem was about. We can't avoid the great mystery. That'd be another good name for this transpersonal force. We can't avoid the great mystery because God creates the darkness. God is in the darkness. God is the darkness. God transforms the darkness. Now that needs some contemplating, those four lines, that progression. There's something in that progression. God creates it, God is in it, God is it, God transforms it. But that brings in what Rumi's talking about, that there's some transpersonal force that we have to allow into the process. The worst thing in the world, the worst suffering in the world I can imagine is hanging on the cross alone. There's no one else there. I mean, Jesus had it pretty tough, and Jesus was the way. Uh, uh, he just said, "I'm a way to. I'm here. I'm a way to show you how to go through all this stuff." And so he was hanging on the cross. That became an icon. We're all there. Some of you are there right now. The thought that it's just you there and there's nobody else involved, that's real suffering. Maybe the deepest suffering. And so one of the poems that came out this week out of the reading was Emmanuel. And it was, that word means, that was one of the names in the gospel for Jesus. It means God is with us through everything. Yeah. And that cuts the suffering in half at least, to realize you're not alone. I mean, Jesus was hanging on the cross. Nobody could take him down. The Romans put him up. But there were two or three people there. His mother, Mary Magdalene, another Mary, lots of Marys, and then maybe one of the youngest of the apostles, but everybody else took off. And that sort of is a human thing. When you're in the presence of suffering, let me out of here. We did hospice for one of our just a beloved teacher who I taught with for 17 years, and she came down with cancer quickly, and she was in a few months she was gone on, graduated, and but it was very painful, and so she had her bed in her living room. She lived alone, and then the teachers took turns sitting with her. The woman that she taught with for 17 years stood at the foot of the bed. She couldn't sit down next to her, and that's just no judgment on her, but it just was startling to see that, and that is our relationship when we see somebody else suffering. Well, you don't want to get too close to it. It's almost like you could catch it, but that's how we deal with suffering too, and but God is a key element in transforming it. You see, without some transpersonal force, I've had a marriage breakdown twice. Pam and I, and this force, revived it. Just the two of us or one of us couldn't have done it, I don't think. So now you go, so you realize that there's some force, call it grace, call it whatever you want. There's some transpersonal force that's working in this world. When I say, be still and trust the love that moves the stars, I'm talking about that transpersonal force that's doing all the stuff in astrophysics, in quantum physics. It's pushing everything along, a kind of oceanic force. So that's what we have in the first part. The second part, befriend the darkness. Now here's our part in it. God can't do it all. If we don't want to go there, it's not happening. I mean, how do we not play our role? How do we not do our part in this transformation? Because you got to remember, from Eckhart's point of view, and this is classic, that God is in us and we are in God. The eye with which I see God is the eye with which God sees me. So there really is no separation here. But there is a transpersonal force at our disposal. But if we're not part of the process, it doesn't work. So we're part of that if we want to be part of that God that transforms it. Yeah, you see. So how do we avoid all this? Well, there's two ways that we increase the pain of whatever we're going through. There's two ways we increase the darkness. Uh, Two ways we uh, transmit it in a way. We can repress it, and we somehow move it out of consciousness. Uh, Distraction. I remember the great darkness of 9/11. You remember that? I bet you do. And I remember the head of our country getting up on the pile there with a bullhorn and uh, basically saying, "We're going to come get the guys who did this," you know. But mostly he said, I can't all do this. We're not all in the army, so most of us can. We could go shopping," he said. We could go shopping. That would be our way of saying we're not going to give into this. And that's this basic, there's a lot of drugs out there. There's fentanyl, heroin, but there's also what Netflix, and there's also, Amazon. You know, we can go shopping, distract ourselves. We can numb ourselves with this kind of stuff. Not that a little, sometimes a little distraction, cuts the edge off of it, and then you can deal with it. But this is about numbing. Pink Floyd said, "I want to become comfortably numb." It's a great song. So you repress it somehow, or you act it out. Blame, recrimination, retribution, revenge. These are all things that are ripping our planet apart, ripping our politics apart. But these are all ways of outering this inner pain that we don't want to deal with. It's your fault. You started it. Like I wish I had $1 for every time I broke up a fight on the junior high playground, and they said, "Well, you started it," and I said, "Well, I'm ending it." This. There's no end to that kind of thing, and that's also a way because we get it out. You take it. This is called offloading too. You offload the energy because this pain, a darkness, this has energy. They talk about dark matter. They talk about dark holes. Dark holes have so much energy, and anything that comes to a certain point to it gets sucked in. See, so darkness has energy, and it's turbulent. That's the upper thing of the painting was red, was hot. Oceans are hot. You see. So befriending the darkness of grief, despair, fear, trauma, and sadness. And why would it be designed like this? The God that I was taught, is controlling everything. And, why would God create darkness? Well, because it helps us go deep. Just as understanding befriending creation gives us a breath that's universal, that's you can't put an edge on it. If you have that, then you realize this. The second station is about befriending darkness, and working with our own pain and suffering is about going deep. It'll give us deep roots of wisdom and compassion. Thich Nhat Hanh says, "No mud, no lotus." Because no lotus, no enlightenment. Because the lotus sinks its roots deep in the mud, in the darkness, and then it's one of these beautiful plants that rises up towards the heaven that opens. No mud, no lotus. So we got to work with this stuff. Contemplative practice, which we're physically going into in a few minutes, creates a space in the heart to exist. So we open our hearts with a contemplative practice, and that's where we can deal with, that's the place we deal with these kinds of things. And suffering deserves a word. The word suffering means to bear the pain. People say, well, can't control the pain, but suffering is optional. Well, there's some truth in that, but also there's, it's not the Jesus model, which I think is the most compelling. Both Jesus and Buddha try to talk about the pain, but suffering really means to bear the pain. And he did that. He said, "This is the way. And then notice what happens once he bears the pain, then there's emptiness, Holy Saturday, and then there's the joy. So how do you transform the darkness? You bear it, you befriend it. Okay. Now, to all the numbing and all the offloading, the third possibility, which is what the Buddha called the middle way, and Jesus is there in the middle of the two other guys crucified. He was the middle way, literally, in symbolism, anyway. And the middle way is to hold it, to own it and hold it. Yeah, this is my pain. Okay, this is the pain that's arriving. This is my darkness. You hold it, and you hold it in the heart. The heart is the space we open to hold it. That's why you have the Sacred Heart in Christianity. Uh, Jesus is normally opening his shirt to show you that. Mary has it too. Uh, I used to be jealous, say, why did these guys get it? Where's mine? Well, you have it, but we have to open it. We have to realize we all have it. And so contemplative practice, like we're going to do in a minute, is just that, to open the heart. Now, if you're in a time of darkness right now, that's sort of overwhelming. People say, well, it's just overwhelming. I can't deal with it. Well, that's like I said, the mind can't deal with it because it's not cut out for it. It's a great mystery. And so you take, it said Mary held these mysteries in the silence of her heart. That's why she is the model in Christianity, anyway, and in Catholicism, definitely, of the contemplative mode. Mary held all these mysteries in the silence of her heart. Okay, so we're sitting primarily, this is why this is called heart to heart. Going back 3 years of talking about the heart. The heart is the place to deal with that. And so somehow it's held in the heart. You own it. And you say, all right, I'm going to take that. You can't work it out with your mind. That's always a good idea when you're overwhelmed in your mind. All right, I got to take it to another place. I'm going to take it to this deeper place called the heart. And it's a place to do the deep work. When people ask me, could you pray for my niece? She's got cancer. She's 12. I just say, sure. So what's her name? Actually, I say, I'll put her on the altar of my heart. Altar is a symbol of transformation in all traditions, whether it's Mayan or Christian or anything in between. When you have altar, it's a place of transformation. So I said, yeah, I'll put her name on the altar of my heart. I also write it down. So when I sit, especially for the people I'm praying for, I'll say, oh, all right, Laura, okay. Breathe, send her love on a breath, whatever. But it's just putting somewhere where the transformation happens. Now, for your own stuff, my image there, and maybe it works for you, or maybe it doesn't. But all I can tell you is what works for me, really. So all anybody can tell anybody. But I imagine a crucible there. A crucible is a kind of bowl, or a bowl that could hold material for the alchemists who were trying to transmit darkness into light, lead into gold. They were trying to transform things, and in this case, we're trying to transform pain and darkness into joy. So I imagine, so if it's my suffering, I put it in the crucible, sits on the altar, center of the altar, and then the heat that will transform the substance, it comes from the fact that I'm owning it, that I'm holding it, that I have my awareness, but there's also the awareness of this transpersonal force, whatever. And you just leave it there, and you don't try to work it out in your head at 2 a.m. in the morning, with the wheels spinning. It doesn't work. You just say, all right, I got to move that. It's the altar of my heart. I'll put it in the crucible. That means you're not obsessing about it, but you're also not trying to get rid of it. You're owning it. It took like about 3.5 years for that to be transformed. The last time my marriage broke down, it was a long time of walking with it every day on the road, just holding it in a way. holding it. Thich Nhat Hanh's image is different. He says for those things, you hold it like a baby that's sort of crying and whining, and you just hold it close to your breast. Again, it's still the heart, and you go, oh, there. That's another image of the same thing. You're still holding it. You see, you're owning it. It's my baby. It's my pain. And now the last one, it just came from a poem that I wrote a long time ago, for which transformed a little bit, for a woman who had a lot of pain in her life, and she said, and people say this to me all the time, so damn sad, and there's a lot to be sad about. Chogyam Trungpa said, you know you're really on the path when you start to develop he called it the original heart of sadness. If you're not sad in this world, you're not paying attention. But you don't have, you can be part of the transformation. I'm so damn sad all the time, she said. But when she finally realized that sad was happy for deep people, she lightened up considerably. She was a 4 on the Enneagram. 4s and 5s are the deepest of all of us. They just sometimes can go too deep. And like Rothko got swallowed up by it. But when she finally realized that sad was happy for deep people, she lightened up considerably and strung Christmas lights all the way to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. The Mariana Trench is supposedly the deepest place on Earth. And when she flipped the switch, she still cried. But now they were tears of joy. People do, well, I work with a lot of women. There's a lot of women here, and they fight back to tears. I said, don't fight back to tears. That's a deep response. I worked up to be able to cry. It took me decades to be able to cry because men are trained different. But she still cried, but now they were tears of joy. So somehow the Christmas lights is a real interesting image in there. I wasn't conscious when I put it in, but somehow when you bring that light, that's the light of Christ, which could be the light of the Buddha. It could be, but there's a kind of inner light. When you bring the inner light to the darkness and flip the switch, you still cry, but now there's tears of joy. Interesting. Yeah. So you can reflect on it yourself tomorrow if you want. It'll be in print. Now I want to segue into our meditation that we went over a little bit long, but it's hard not to with the Meister. Now, here I want to give you just a short thing by Meister to lead us into meditation. Then I'll start the clock. This is key now. This is key to even understanding meditation. What we should be doing here for this 20 minutes. A Meister said, God is not found in the soul by adding anything, but by subtraction. Get that. God is not found in the soul by adding anything, but by subtraction. So this is the process of subtraction. It's the process of letting go of the veils. I like to say, we constructed a suit of armor in our kid life crisis, and it was composed of 70,000 veils, 70,000 thoughts about what the world was like, what our place in it was. And so he's hitting right at it. He said, you're not going to find God because God's behind all that armoring and veils. So you don't want to add anymore. So you don't want to go in there and think some beautiful thoughts. Thinking's the problem. Thoughts aren't the problem. Thinking the thoughts aren't the problem. It's what I once called, when we go in for our 20 minutes, we turn off the blender. Turn off this appliance. It's very helpful, but it's a time to turn it off. That does not mean thoughts stop. If you're trying to clear your mind of thoughts, you'll quit meditating at some point because it's impossible. No, what you're turning off is thinking about the thoughts. Either you're grabbing onto, boy, that's a juicy thought. I mean, I fail at this all the time. For 50 years, I fail at it because some juicy thought will come in and I'll start thinking about it. But now I've learned to, I'll take a breath, use my sacred word if it's really sticky, and then I'll be back. Just there. You're just there. and you're doing a house cleaning here. You're dropping the veils every time you fail, and you're either reacting to a thought, trying to work with a thought, any of the stuff, and you're trying to hold on to the thought for the 5 minutes when I can write or whatever. And so no, leave it all go. No, don't resist thoughts. Let them come and go. Don't grab onto them and start thinking about them, and don't even worry about holding on to them. And be willing to fail again, and fail better. Fail better means you come back sooner to just being present, open, and available in the moment. Okay. Now today, if you're carrying some kind of special, you're dealing with some kind of special pain or special darkness, something extraordinary, especially, somehow move it to the heart. Find your own image if you want of how you're holding it, and just be with it. Just be present, open, and available. And let God do what God can do.